in this general direction. Please rise as you are able to the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The League of Women Voters is a grassroots education advocacy organization. Is there a campaign or not? No. Okay. Didn't know. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, no campaign.
At political form.
We conduct a voter registration drive and candidate forums debates like this one. We study issues, reach consensus positions on those issues, and then we lobby to promote those positions. The League is nonpartisan. We never endorse any candidate or party, and we welcome new members, both men and women. And we have a clipboard on the table. If you're interested in more information about the League, please sign with your contact information. Now a word about our co-sponsors. The East Bay newspapers publish with newspapers throughout the East Bay, including the Warren Candidate. The Full Channel provides TV, internet, and phone service. They are broadcasting this forum on live and then taken into the rebroadcast on Full Channel 17. And the dates and times are on the top of your programs. The East Bay Chamber of Commerce encourages local business in Bristol, Warren, and Barrington, and they have provided a refreshment system. Now for introductions. The moderator is Scott Pickering, General Manager of the East Bay newspaper. And from Full Channel is Jesse Buffalo, who is walking around making sure his equipment is working properly. And the East Bay Chamber of Commerce, we have Kathy Marabello, who is with the Navigant Credit Union, and John Daniel, who is with Farmers and First CPAs. And they're right there. I think there are some candidates in the audience who are not in a forum this evening. Please raise your hand, and when I point to you, stand and introduce yourself. Okay, right back there.
Senator Cindy Coyne, Senate District 32, both House District 67 and 68 overlap my district.
Great. Yes.
Susan Donovan, House District 69, Bristol, part of Bristol, and a little bit of Portsmouth, Rhode Island.
Yes.
Walter Feelig, State Senator, District 10, all of the town of Warren, about 35% of Bristol, and about 55% of Tiverton.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, I'm Erin Schofield. I'm the Vice Chair of the Bristol Warren Regional School Committee and ready for the election.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. Each candidate has a total of 11 minutes to speak. The candidates have drawn lots to determine seating position. The number one candidate is on the left. After the candidates each give an opening statement, the moderator will ask questions that have been submitted on index cards. The first candidate will answer the first question. Then the next candidate will ask for a brief response to the same question. After that, if any candidate wants to comment further, they can raise an index card or a wild card, and they each got a bunch of wild cards. And when the moderator sees a wild card being waved around, he will recognize the person who can speak.
Excuse me, we can't hear in the back.
Oh, sorry. The moderator will then ask the next question of the second candidate and so on. Wild cards can be used to extend the opening statement, to comment on issues raised, and to lengthen the closing statement. The timing of the forum is done by two people here in the front row. When the speaker has only 15 seconds left of his time, the timers will wave a yellow sign. There it is. When time is up, they will wave a red one. When the speaker sees red, he can finish his sentence. If he starts another sentence, we will charge him a wild card. We will keep track of how many wild cards have been used by each candidate on the chart here. Your job now as part of the audience is to be silent. Please turn off any gadget that might cause bullying, and please do not applaud your favorite candidate. At the end of the forum, the moderator will give a signal, and then you can show your appreciation for these candidates who are working very hard to represent you. Now I'm going to turn the forums over to Scott.
Thank you, Joanne, and welcome everyone here tonight. As Joanne said, I'm Scott Pickering, General Manager of East Bay Newspapers. For some of you candidates, we've done this before and we're familiar with the format. For everyone else, I'd like to say a couple opening remarks. Silencing phones is a very good thing. Not applauding your favorite candidate, applauding your least favorite candidate as well is appreciated. I want to just say to everyone running for public office, they all deserve some applause and some recognition because these are often somewhat selfless roles, selfless jobs. Anyone who serves in public office gives up a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of resources and time away from family to do this. And so anyone who's volunteering to do it, even just campaigning is, as I've seen for many candidates, an exhausting process. So they all deserve some recognition and thanks for that. So we're going to begin the night with the candidates for House District 67. We're going to begin with opening statements. Mr. Knight, you may begin.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? All right. Good evening. My name is Jason Knight. I'm the sitting state representative, and I want to say thank you to the League for hosting us tonight. 2 years ago, the voters of this district sent me to the State House to be a strong voice for Warren and Barrington. And I'm proud to say that in those 2 years, I have been working every day on behalf of our communities to make them better. I've sponsored and passed legislation to protect our community from gun violence. I've helped establish the Warren Housing Court through legislation. I've protected children with new and improved background checks to plug a loophole that was there. And we've brought needed funds to the schools statewide for building repairs if the voters approve the bond in November. I'm looking forward to serving you again in the General Assembly, and I'd be grateful for your vote on November 6th, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say, go Sox.
Mr. Gould.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Darrell Gould. Those of you who don't know me, I'm a Warren resident. I'm a small business owner, father of 3 young children in the Warren Bristol Warren School District. My daughter Abigail is at KMS, and I have twin boys at Hugh Cole. My background really is as a small business owner and an advocate. I've been politically involved for the better part of the last 5 years on a day in, day out basis. I advocate for kids in our school district. I advocate for small businesses, and I advocate for the average taxpayer. That's really what my background is. I think, to be perfectly honest, that's one of the biggest differences between Jason and I. And I hope to talk to you a little bit more about that tonight and point out more of the differences and why maybe an asset is your next district rep.
Thank you. We're going to start with the questions. And for those in the audience, this tends to go really quick. The candidates are going to get a total of 6 questions. It's going to be over before you know it. So listen intently. Mr. Knight, keeping in mind that Massachusetts has legalized cannabis for recreational purposes and will be opening stores in the near future, where do you stand on Rhode Island's own regulations?
My position now is the same as it was 2 years ago. I think that the day is coming when cannabis will be deregulated and indeed legalized across the United States. Before it happens in Rhode Island, I want to see a strong regulatory structure to manage how it's introduced into the community. I'm concerned about just opening the floodgates and letting us have a free-for-all. I think that would be bad for public safety. I know that the voters in our community are concerned about this, and I've heard from those people over the last 2 years. So I am cautiously for it if we have the right regulatory scheme designed to protect public safety. And the big thing I'm concerned about, frankly, is the driving while under the influence. We need to solve that problem before we allow that to happen in Rhode Island.
Thank you. Mr. Gould?
Cannabis has been actually an issue that I've been involved with for the better part of the last 12 years. 12 years ago, when the legislation to establish 3 compassion centers in the state for medical marijuana purposes was being heard, and I testified at the Department of Health on that. We chased Lincoln Chafee around the state trying to advocate for the passing of that legislation. This is a perfect example of an area where I really think Rhode Island, we're small, we have an opportunity, we should be nimble. But I think it's one of those things where we're actually following. Those of us in East Bay know this. We can't go shopping in our area because there's nothing here. We all have to go to Swansea, Seekonk. Massachusetts has been very good about setting up these retail centers in Attleboro, so we actually have to go to Massachusetts for everything. And that's something that needs to change. Cannabis is something where we're talking about a plant. The research has been done on this. States have legalized it. This isn't something where we're setting the tone for things. We're simply trying to do the right thing. I don't see a problem with passing medical marijuana legislation in general.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Gould. What improvements do you support to make ownership of guns safer for the community?
Gun control is an interesting issue, and that's one of the big issues Jason and I really part ways on. For me, simply possessing something doesn't make doesn't make somebody a criminal. The line is really at aggression. If I want to have whatever firearm in my house, I'm not harming anyone. The line is when you actually use that, and we have laws against that. So as far as what we need to do to make things safer, I think honestly it really has to come to, let's look at what actually works. I think that banning guns or mislabeling guns and selling fear, it doesn't help anything. What I think we really need to do is look at the root cause of these issues. Let's look at the overprescription of beta blockers with kids, the positive influence that male role models will have on young males. Let's look at all of these societal issues, the effects of bullying, social isolation. Sitting here and banning guns, it doesn't solve anything. Look at the way that we have gun-free zones in our schools. Why is it that those are the only places that really we see these mass shootings? I haven't heard of any police departments getting shot up, and that's likely because there are a lot of people with guns inside. So I'm not going to go so far as to say teachers and administration have guns, but this idea that legalizing a piece of property is going to fix anything, I think it's lazy, and I don't think it solves the root problem.
Mr. Knight?
That's a big topic, and 30 seconds is a short period of time. So I believe that we can and should do everything we can to minimize the risk of gun violence in our community. I like to see a day when we can, as much as possible, be free, consistent with the Second Amendment, be free of the risk of gun violence coming down the road to us or, God forbid, our children. Last session, we took concrete steps in the General Assembly, and I was a sponsor of these bills. That we passed a bill to ban people who are convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence from owning or possessing firearms, and we passed a red flag bill which allowed the police, in the right circumstances, with court approval, to come and take somebody's guns who's shown to be mentally unstable. Those bills are in effect today, I'm proud to say. In the next session, I will work to improve our gun safety climate. by working to pass magazine limits and passing the Safe Schools Act, which would prohibit concealed carry in schools. I don't agree with my opponent that gun-free zones are a magnet for shooters. I think what we've seen in our community is people who are mentally unstable going to the source of their irritation, which too often, unfortunately, is schools. So that is the stark difference between myself and my opponent.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Knight. Again, these questions, the majority of these questions are submitted by the audience, so the language is not my language, just so you know. So if there's presumptions in here, they're not mine. That's just a legal disclaimer. Any other questions? And your time is up. The war on drugs has failed nationally, with overdoses increasing throughout the region. What are your thoughts on dealing with this epidemic here in Rhode Island?
There is no doubt that we have an opioid epidemic and problems here in Rhode Island. I support the governor's task force on this. They have come up with a plan that focuses on prevention, rescue, treatment, and recovery. In the prevention world, they want to get doctors away from prescribing opioids. In the rescue area, they want to make sure that every police department and every agency that would come in contact or have be near an overdose incident would have naloxone available to them. In terms of treatment, we have made medically prescribed treatment available here in Rhode Island everywhere, including the prison, which there was a recent article in Politico that said Rhode Island led the way in the nation by providing medically assisted treatment in the prison and preventing overdose deaths when people come out of the prison, because that's one of the most dangerous times for someone who's addicted to these drugs. And finally, long-term recovery options need to be improved in our state. I know that our Department of Health is looking at that. It's the one place where Rhode Island really is a leader in this area.
Mr. Gould.
May I repeat the question?
Yeah. The war on drugs has failed nationally, with overdoses increasing throughout the region. What are your thoughts on dealing with this epidemic here in Rhode Island?
I think the most important thing is to really start to look at this as a health issue and not as an issue with criminality. The war on drugs in itself is something that's failed, and it's disproportionately punished people who are low income and inner city and people of color. There is a disproportionate amount as far as prosecution, and most of our prison population is young black men simply because of the war on drugs. It's failed. It's something where we continue to throw good money after bad, and it doesn't solve the problem. As far as the opioid epidemic in the state, I actually did some work with a group that focuses on recovery, and there was some legislation that this past session that I spoke with regards to, called Kristen's Law, that actually punished people for providing, if you were to, for example, if Jason were to go out and get some drugs for me and something were to happen to me, he could actually be charged with murder, basically. It's an interesting thing because the people in that community reached out to me recently because it was something where it's an issue that people who tend to be more progressive leaning, they tend to be very supportive of them. And they were really surprised this past session when Jason actually approached them and said, this was something he thought the law was ill-advised, and it was what I was told, something he was willing to stake his legislative career on and a hill that he was willing to die on. They were rather shocked when it hit the floor, and rather than speaking against it, it was actually something he voted in favor for.
Where are we in?
You are welcome to use wild card reply.
That was the 30-second response, right?
That is correct.
All right. I think it's important to talk about Kristen's Law. So for those of you who don't know, Kristen's Law, I think, is a bad law. I'm just telling you right now, and my position hasn't changed on it. It criminalizes the act of, if you deliver drugs to somebody who dies of subsequent overdose, then you can be held, found guilty and sentenced for essentially murder, right? It's a drug-induced death. That bill came to the floor, or came to the House of Representatives and the Senate with two very strong sponsors. The prime sponsor in the House of Representatives was the Speaker himself, and then the Senate side was a long-term senior senator. That bill was going to become law no matter what anyone did, and that was the situation. I voted against it in committee. I said it was a bad law. I voted against it in committee, and between committee and the floor vote on the law, I looked myself in the mirror and I said, well, I can stand up and I can vote no along with the 9 or 10 other people who are going to vote no, and not stop it, but make a show about not liking it, or I can try to make it better, at least marginally better. And so what I did was I authored an amendment which would take people who share drugs out of the bill rather than, and keep the people who sell drugs in the bill. I authored an amendment, I collected sponsors for the amendment passed on the floor, but the price of the amendment was voting yes on the bill. And I reluctantly did so. Even so, at the end of the day, this is the legislative process. This is compromise in action. This is what happens when 75 people from all walks of life and all political stripes get together and try to come to an agreement about really hard issues such as Kristen's Law and the opioid crisis.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Mr. Gould begins with you. How can state legislators help local businesses?
This is a question I get asked quite often, and my answer is always the same. I think they need to get out of the way. Quite simply, the government is not, I always ask this question of people, please give me an example of something that our government does well. And all of our interaction with government is either we're paying taxes, we're paying a fine, where we have someone telling us what we can do with our property, we're telling us, we deal with the DMV, we deal with UHIP, we deal with all of these all these acronyms that basically just are, it's an example of government failure. The government is not really good, at business. We've seen the current administration that we have, as far as the governor is concerned. Their solution to the problem is basically giving taxpayer dollars away to lure companies to come to our state. Ultimately, what happens is when those subsidies dry up, these companies leave. So, a perfect example is the governor touted. In most states, the governor will say, we're pleased to announce that company X is hiring 3,000 people in our state. In Rhode Island, we brag about 80 jobs. GE is a perfect example. GE, basically, we attracted them to the state with some tax subsidies. Again, this is our money. And we drew them to the state, and we all paid $80,000 for each one of the jobs that GE promised us. They still haven't, this was over 2 years ago, they still haven't met the 80 jobs that they were going to give us. And they're talking about a reorg, and they might not hit that number. So as far as the state's involvement in matters of business, I think they should get out of the way. I think we really need to look at our tax structure, our regulatory structure, rather than trying to entice people with tax dollars. Let's look at the root cause of the problem, and let's start saying, okay, how about rather than picking winners and losers and saying, we're going to take tax dollars and give it to one type of business. And there's a perfect example of this. The governor actually tried to recruit a business. They made t-shirts, custom t-shirts. You could make them on order. She was promising tax dollars to that company without even realizing there was a company in our state that actually had that same exact business. How do you explain to that business that you started here in Rhode Island, you built this, and at the end of the day, we're going to help finance your competition so that they can have a competitive advantage against you, because someone needs to say that we do business well in Rhode Island and this is how things work. The way we do it doesn't work. We need to start looking at things, again, from a regulatory structure standpoint. People don't need licenses to braid hair. We don't need licenses to walk dogs. Let small businesses, the economic entry of the state, stop these barriers to entry in that space. Let people start their businesses and grow.
Mr. Knight,
30 seconds?
30 seconds, same question.
All right, so the General Assembly can help business and small business by being a partner for success. Number one, whatever we do, we have to do no harm, right? Let's not make it harder to do business. People have jobs to do, and we want to make it easier to do them. We want to be a partner in their success. We need to, right down to the deck plate level. I'm a Navy guy, so deck plate means right down to the lowest state worker. They need to be customer service facing and help businesses when they come to them. I'm a big fan of public-private partnerships, like the one we have set up with Electric Boat, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So we have 2 questions left, and then closing statements. You both have 1 wild card remaining, so we'll have very short closing statements. Mr. Knight, this question goes to you first. What do you plan to do to support reproductive health care in light of the possible changes happening at the federal level?
So I 100% believe that everyone ought to have control over their body. For me, it's a liberty issue. I'm a full supporter of reproductive rights, including access to abortion, and I want to see everyone have access to that health care. At the federal level, frankly, Roe versus Wade is at risk. With Judge Kavanaugh being elevated to the bench, I have strong concerns that Roe versus Wade could be overturned or shut down and boxed in so much that it's effectively overturned while it's still exists as a case. I want to change our state laws, which are frozen in time from like 1968, where abortion is a felony today under our state laws that are frozen under Roe versus Wade. I want to bring those up to modern times, codify Roe versus Wade into our state law. I'm the prime sponsor, or not the prime sponsor, I am a top 5 sponsor on that bill. The last 2 years, I will do so again.
Mr. Gould.
As a libertarian, I'm pro-choice on everything. My beliefs politically are that everybody's body is their own property, and what you do with it is your own choice, so long as you're not infringing upon the safety and rights of others. Personally, I'm as a man, I could never understand what the choices a woman have to make with their body. So absent of that real deep understanding, it's not something that I personally have. I would never say one way or another what somebody should be doing with their body.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Gould. Should the General Assembly enable the Bristol-Warren Regional School District to have 1 combined local property tax base? Why or why not?
I'm not a huge fan of additional taxes, but what I've seen is a tug of war between Bristol and Warren. Of all the issues that we have with our school district, believe it or not, that's actually really low on the totem pole. My whole involvement in getting into politics was based upon advocacy for students. Last night I sat in the high school up until 11 o'clock last night, advocating, standing with other parents who their kids have been bullied and by teachers, by staff, by other students, and because people are too protective of their jobs or their political seats, this gets tabled. It's morally reprehensible. The stories you hear about these families and these kids, that's ground zero for me. And I think so, in as much as, to answer the question, I think, yeah, maybe we should look at, an additional tax, so long as, it's not in addition to and it's kind of in place of how we currently fund the schools. Thank you.
Mr. Knight.
Well, certainly fair taxation is important. I know that, I represent half of Warren, and I don't have a representative role inside of Bristol. So I hear from Warren mostly about the uneven structure of the Bristol-Warren School District governing structure. I think it's primarily a local issue. If the citizens of these 2 towns get together and decide on some taxing authority that they want to go to versus what they have now, then I'll be fully supportive of it as long as it doesn't hurt Warren.
Thank you. We'll move to closing statements, and you each have up to a minute for that. Mr. Knight, you may proceed first. Unless
I got the opening first?
You got the opening first.
All right, that, great. Just want to make sure it's fair.
Daryl doesn't believe in rules, so he doesn't really care.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to serve. This has been a tremendous experience in my life these last 2 years. I've learned so much, and I so enjoyed the experience of standing up for these 2 communities, Barrington and Warren, and I really appreciate the chance to serve again. Rhode Island is a lovely place. It's a special place. We chose to live here, and I think that Rhode Islanders deserve a first-class government and a government that is a partner to the people so that we can make the most of our quality of life here in Rhode Island and achieve success together. We can't do that with something that doesn't work or has problems. And it requires roll up your sleeves, get it done grit every single day to make it happen. I want to go back and work on that some more, and I'd be grateful for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you. Mr. Gould?
I think one of the biggest differences between Jason and I is, and I said this before, he's a politician, I'm an advocate. People who know me know exactly where I stand on things. You get a pretty good idea of what I believe in, and I will run through walls for people and causes that I feel passionate about. I take issue with the idea that if you go up and, because there's only 9 people on your side, you don't stand your ground, and you just go with, what the masses do. I have questions when Jason 2 years ago and on a fairly regular basis says he's going to stand up against leadership. I don't know if standing up against leadership means you vote in line with Speaker Mattiello 98.6% of the time. I don't agree with myself 98.6% of the time, so I don't know how you purport to stand against somebody. This is something where I see, and I question the progressives in the room if he's really your candidate. At the end of the day, when Jason supports tax dollars for the Paw Sox Stadium and giving money to millionaires, how is that something that is in line with really the tenets of your political beliefs?
Thank you.
Can I?
No, you can't. You use your final wild card during your closing statement.
Did I?
Yeah, you did. It's all right. Thank you both. Round of applause.